What's up, amigos? And I'm actually kind of excited to bring this update, and I didn't think it'd be so soon, but I have been constantly trying to improve the rogue since my last build. So this video right here kind of popped off more than I thought it would, and you all really enjoyed the build. Some of you had some pretty valid questions and suggestions, like showing better gameplay or how it would pair up against single target damage. So first off, I want to say I'm working on a poison variation to compare the two, but this updated guide brings upwards to 1,000,000 damage crits, which is something Twisted Blades definitely has a hard time doing. And how are we doing this? Simple: combo points. So combo points are vastly underrated, I think, because majority of people kind of jumped on that meta wagon and thought Inner Sight was great. We started running Preparation because Death Trap was really busted, and I wanted it to be our main source of clear as much as possible, but with this build, we don't really have to rely on it that much anymore. Instead, we worry about combo point uptime, which in turn really is simple because in between resource generation, we were already spamming Puncture to proc our Might aspect to get our damage reduction. We were also using it to proc our Expectant to stack up core damage skill, which takes 3 basic skills to reach the full 30%, and I think it's perfect pairing it with combo points. Now, it also, Puncture is just a great filler also because it has decent damage. It can crit upwards to 30k sometimes. So, to take full advantage of this swap, we also use the Condemnation, which is a unique dagger that grants us 20 to 40% extra core damage. And yes, I understand it's a unique, but this is a fairly common unique. The additional bonus of this is that when we use basic skills, we have a 30% chance to generate 3 combo points, which means we just get to spam full 3-point combos more. Now, before we take a look into the skill tree, let's take a look at our gear. So for our helmet, you always want to make sure that you have plus shadow imbuement and cooldown. It's a huge bonus if it has life and stats like dex and intelligence, especially intelligence. On my helmet, I am rocking Might, which gives us the 20% damage reduction when we hit enemies with our basic skill. Chest piece. Now this is where you want to roll defensive layering like damage reduction to close, distant, and global damage reduction, percent armor, max life. Most damage rolls are not worth it. If you don't have defensive affixes on it, in this case, I rolled Cutthroat because I have life, armor, and damage reduction to close enemies. We are rocking the Mangler's aspect, so we have a lucky hit chance up to 45% when damaging a vulnerable target. We have a chance to daze them. It's just an extra conditional crowd control that we can stack up for our damage. Gloves. Now on gloves, you always want to make sure that you have your plus ranks to Twisting Blades, preferably 4, but 3 is fine as well. You always want to make sure that you have your crit strike chance. In this case, I have a 9.8%, and on my gloves, I actually have strength and willpower, and this is for Paragon purposes, but in a perfect world, you would have something like crit imbued damage and also attack speed. I have a pair of trifectas in my stash, but again, I wanted the stats for Paragon purposes. Now, we use Edgemaster here for the increased damage the more resource that we have. Our pants, this is another huge defensive piece. Just like the chest piece, you want percent armor, max life, damage reduction affixes. I have 3 defensive affixes and opted to keep the damage after killing an elite. It's a massive amount of damage after we kill an elite. So as soon as we kill that first elite, blow it up, it'll just help us finish everything off. Now I use cheats here for the damage reduction from anything that is crowd controlled. This is something that I'm weighing, and when I get Temerity Legs, I will obviously use the Temerity Legs and try to fit Conceited in as well for that combo. But for the meantime, this is what I have, and I'm using cheats. So one of the big changes that I've made to the build, at least for me, is that I am using the Penitent Greaves instead of my boots that had +3 evade charges. And that really did change up a lot because I was constantly on the move, using my evade charges to get through enemies, to hit more enemies with the Twisting Blades. So it definitely is a little bit of a learning curve and more of, something to adapt to. But this is definitely your BIS. You will be doing 7 to 10% more damage to chilled enemies. So for our ranged weapon, crossbows, always crossbows. You always want to choose crossbows because of the implicit, which is the vulnerable damage. In this case, I have a perfect 60% vulnerable damage on this, and it is hands down the best stat in the game. If you haven't yet, go check out my video about it on the channel for a quick explanation why it's the best stat in the game. Anyways, extra vuln is what I want on this crossbow, but I had to settle for dex because I'm up to 2.4 million for each reroll. But dex isn't that bad at all. It's still a main stat. Main stat is not a bad thing. Now, I also have double crit. I have crit strike damage and crit strike damage with imbued skills. This just helps the overall clear when you're popping things with shadow imbuement. And then I have damage to crowd control enemies, which usually is a conditional affix, but because we're running the Penitent Greaves, it is not anymore. This is going to be a constant damage increase because everything around you will be getting slowed. So we already talked about the Condemnation unique. Now we're going to talk about the sword. Now this sword has 4 perfect affixes. Could it be better? Yes. In terms of rolls, yes, absolutely. But these are the 4 stats that I highly recommend. We have vulnerable damage, damage to crowd controlled enemies, which I just stated is not a conditional anymore. It is a constant increase. We have damage to close and crit strike damage. This sword is amazing. All 4 of these stats will scale so well with the build. Now ring 1. Ring 1, we have crit chance, damage, and vuln. 3 stats that you absolutely want on rings. 4th is an added bonus, and in a perfect world, damage to close would be insane here because of how high the modifier can reach, which we do have one on our second ring. A second ring, we have close, crit chance, vuln, and max life. Again, perfect world, I replaced the max life for crit damage, but this ring isn't bad at all. I actually enjoy the 800 life that we have from it. We use accelerating aspect, crits from our core skills, grant attack speed. We crit a lot with my current setup. With my current setup, we are sitting at 32.2% crit chance. Now, amulet. I have not even come close to replacing this thing. It has +3 weapon mastery, cooldown reduction, and I rolled energy cost reduction on it. You can get imbuement ranks on amulets, which would be, again, perfect world if you rolled +3 weapon mastery, +3 imbuement. That would bring our imbuements up to +12 ranks, but good luck getting something like that. Now, on my other build, I actually would have chosen +3 exploit over weapon mastery, but since we have dagger and sword here, weapon mastery is pretty bis on our amulet, I'd say. And on the amulet, we run disobedience for an absurd amount of damage reduction because of all the armor. Again, I said it before in multiple videos, this is probably the best aspect in the entire game, hands down. So let's take this time to talk about Paragon. So in my last video, I didn't really go in depth as much as people would have liked me to go in depth with Paragon. So first and foremost, if you followed my last build, I do apologize for this, but we have swapped up the entire Paragon. Everything is pretty much changed, and that is because I have hit 80, I've gotten more points, but I have also leveled up my closer glyph to level 15 so I can unlock the radius. So hear me out. So we start on our board and we come up and grab the prime node. Now, and the surrounding magic nodes, this is going to give us a massive DPS increase. We get a total of 30% damage between the magic nodes and the rare because we meet the requirement of 160 int. We also gain 4% life. Now, I'm not going to explain everything here, but this is how the board looks with the first glyph, which again is closer. I leveled up to 15. Every 5 decks, we gain 5% increased damage. The bonus here is we take 10% reduced damage, global reduced damage, when wielding a melee weapon, which we are a melee rogue. But overall, we are gaining 65% cutthroat damage. That is a lot of damage for our main cutthroat skill, which is Twisted Blades. The rare nodes that we grab here are Skillful and Lawless. We grab the Lawless now. We didn't before, but it's 200 armor. It's another 10 dex, which is just great. You know, the 10 dex from Skillful and Lawless, that adds into our glyph because it's in the radius. So first board. The first board that we go to is the Cunning Stratagem. Your non-damage combo point bonuses are increased by 33% when you spend 3 combo points. Now, the key word is non-damage. We don't go for this because the non-damage portion of our combo point spending would be movement speed. We don't care about that. Instead, we care about the rare nodes. We take a lot of these rare nodes throughout the Paragon. I have went over it for a while now. It's pretty insane when you meet the bonus requirements especially, but core skill damage, more armor. I think total we're getting at like 600 armor just from these couple nodes, but we're also gaining about almost 56% core skill damage just from these rare nodes, plus the extra, you know, what, 21, 28, I think 28% extra core damage as well. So yeah, just massive damage. Here we socket in Exploit. Exploit is your most important glyph of the build, and any build in the entire game. This is the best glyph. It allows you to inflict vulnerability on anything around that you hit, and we gain extra vulnerable damage. So the third Paragon board, which is a massive board, we take a lot on this board actually. We are going to Exploit Weakness. Whenever we deal damage to a vulnerable enemy, they take 1% increased damage, up to 15%. This is more so for single target. This is just a permanent stacking buff that we get on a boss. They're always gonna be vulnerable when we're spamming puncture. So yeah, this is really nice. But what's also really nice about this, again, the rare nodes. So we gain an extra 50% vulnerable damage bonus between our rare nodes and the magic nodes. And the big thing is that we also gain 48% total damage to elites, and then movement speed after killing elites. The glyph of choice here is Combat. We gain crit strike damage with a core skill, but every time that we crit, which again, my setup, I have 32% crit, we gain 12% of our energy cost back. The fourth board of choice is going to be Tricks of the Trade, easily. Your marksman skills grant your next cutthroat skill 25% increased damage. For those who don't know, puncture is considered a marksman skill. So every time that we spam puncture, which we're always going to be spamming for our combo point generation, we're going to be buffing another 25% for our cost, or our spender, which is our twisting blades. But also in here, we have some pretty disgusting rare nodes as well, including damage to close enemies, damage reduction, crit damage, fizz damage, we have more armor, and we have damage to elites. So let's go ahead and take a look at our skill tree and then get into the gameplay and wrap this video up. So the skill tree for the most part has not changed at all. There are a couple passives that I changed around, but please also keep in mind that I have been lazy and I haven't even unlocked my other 2 skill points from my renown yet. So this is only 58. So puncture into enhance into fundamental. If you don't have the exploit glyph, this is your main source of inflicting vulnerability in the beginning. Then you have twisted blades into enhance into advanced twisted blades. Even through the nerf, this is our, our modifier of choice to reduce cooldowns as much as we can. We want to keep spamming our imbuements and use death trap when we can. We take 3 points in the sturdy for 12% close damage reduction and 3% in the siphonage strikes. We take 3 points in the siphonage strikes. This is actually really important because again, we have a lot of crit chance. This is a great sustain. You would be surprised how much this actually helps. We take a point in the shadow step into enhance and it's a methodical. Methodical will allow us to stun. We take shadow step because it's our only source of becoming unstoppable, which allows us to get out of a pinch, aka any crowd control, whether we're stunned, knocked down, anything, frozen. This allows us to escape that. It's super important. We max out our weapon mastery, and this is why I think my amulet and just having +3 is best. We have, when attacking based on weapon type, we gain the 30% increased damage to healthy enemies because of our condemnation dagger, but we also gain 18% increased overall damage because of our sword. We take dash, we take enhanced dash, for, of course, the 15% increased crit strike, and we take discipline, the slow, and potentially daze. So moving on to exploit, of course, we're putting 3 points into here, 18% increased damage to healthy and injured, and then 3 points in the malice, more damage to vulnerable. We take a point in the shadow crash, which is a prereq for consuming shadows. Consuming shadows is going to be huge when we're AoEing and clearing through a dungeon, just so we can get our energy back. And of course, we're maxing out shadow imbuement. We're taking enhanced shadow imbuement so we can crit against injured enemies so we can finish them off. And blended shadow imbuement is going to be another source of vulnerability infliction. We take 3 points in the precision imbuement for increased crit strike chance when we're hitting people with our 2 charges of shadow imbue. Now here's the difference here. Because we're running penitent greaves, we're actually running frigid finesse because we deal 10% increased damage to chilled enemies. And we're always, again, we're going to be chilling all enemies that we are close to because of just how Penitent works. We take a point into Innervation. This gives us a lucky hit chance to gain 8 energy, and 3 points in the Trap Mastery. When we activate Death Trap, we gain 12% increased crit strike chance against vulnerable enemies and crowd controlled enemies. We take a point into Adrenaline Rush just to have the extra energy regen. And now for our keystone, instead of running exposure, because we're not really concerned with the reset of our death trap anymore, we are actually going to be running momentum. This way, when we hit a stunned, dazed, or frozen enemy, which we have a chance to do all of that, or hit an enemy from behind, we gain a stack of momentum. When we have 3 stacks, we'll have increased movement, energy regen, and another 20% damage reduction. Now, if you are seeing that you're not really needing the extra damage reduction, you have a choice to run close quarters as well, which just means damaging a close enemy with marksman or cutthroat skills each grant a 10% attack speed bonus. While both bonuses are active, we deal another 20% damage against crowd controlled enemies. Now this is great if we're doing it for the clear, and the attack speed isn't bad at all. The only way that you can proc this on a boss is if you stagger them, so keep that in mind. For higher pushing, I have been using momentum. I think it's great not having to worry as much, especially when it comes to the bigger enemies that may one-shot you usually. The 20% damage reduction is pretty key. So that's it for this updated Shadow Dancer combo point build. Again, thank you all so much for the support over the last few weeks since release, and I'll end the video with some gameplay of some Nightmare Dungeons. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it, and until next time, amigos, take care.